The trading station orbited a dying red giant, its metallic hull reflecting the crimson light like blood on steel. Inside, sat alone in the human quarters, staring at the holographic display that showed the dwindling supplies of Earth goods. 3 months. That was how long he had been the only human representative on Station 9, surrounded by 17 different alien species, each more confusing than the last. He had volunteered for this assignment, thinking it would be an adventure. The Galactic Trade Consortium had opened their arms to humanity 5 years ago, and Earth had jumped at the chance to join the cosmic marketplace. What they had not mentioned in the recruitment videos was how exhausting it would be to exist as a walking curiosity. The door chimed, glanced at the security feed, and felt his stomach drop. It was her again. Stood outside his quarters, her form shifting between solid and semi-transparent like oil on water. She was a species known throughout the galaxy for their ability to manipulate their physical appearance and for their incredibly long, where humans lived maybe a century if they were lucky, existed for thousands of years. This made them patient traders, dangerous enemies, and as was learning, incredibly persistent when they wanted something. He opened the door, flowed inside, her body solidifying into the form she seemed to prefer around him. She stood roughly his height, with features that were almost human but not quite right. Her eyes were too large, too knowing. Her skin held a faint luminescence that pulsed with her heartbeat if she even had a heart. "Of Earth," she said, her voice like wind through crystal, "I have come with a proposition." "I already told you," said, keeping his voice steady. "Earth chocolate is not for sale at any price. The shipment is allocated for the medical staff." Laughed, a sound that made the air shimmer. "I am not here for your chocolate, though I admit the substance is fascinating. The way it affects your neural chemistry is quite remarkable. No, I am here about something far more valuable." She moved closer and found himself backing up until his legs hit the edge of his bunk. This was a negotiation tactic, he told himself. They were known for using intimidation and seduction interchangeably. Do not show weakness. "The consortium has a problem," continued. "There is a species called perhaps you have heard of them." Everyone had. The worthy of the galaxy, a race of aggressive expansionists who had conquered 40 systems before the consortium had managed to contain them behind a network of defense stations. The peace had held for 300 years, but it was an uneasy peace. "What do they have to do with me?" asked. "They are moving again," said quietly. "Our intelligence suggests they are preparing for a major offensive. They have developed new weapon systems, new strategies. The Consortium Council is frightened, though they will not admit it openly." "And you think one human trader can help with that?" His form rippled, and suddenly she was closer, close enough that could feel the strange electromagnetic field that surrounded her species. "I think humanity is the most interesting anomaly the galaxy has seen in 1 million years. Your species has been spacefaring for barely a century, yet you have already begun to make waves. Do you know what other species say about humans?" Shook his head, not trusting his voice. "They say you are reckless. They say you are violent. They say you are stupid and short-sighted and far too emotional." His hand reached out, not quite touching him, but close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her palm. "But they also say you are unpredictable, creative, that you can think of solutions to problems that 1,000 years of conventional wisdom would never consider." "You want to hire humans as mercenaries," said flatly. "No," pulled back slightly. "The consortium has mercenaries. What we need is someone who can think like someone who can understand their mindset. They are conquerors. They value strength and directness. They respect predators." Her eyes locked onto his. "Your species evolved as persistence hunters, yes? You would chase prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. You are predators wearing the mask of civilization." Felt a chill run down his spine. "You want me to negotiate with them?" "I want you to do more than negotiate. They have issued a challenge. They have claimed a disputed system at the edge of consortium space, a system rich in rare minerals. They have declared that any species that wishes to contest their claim may send a champion. Single combat in the fashion. Winner takes the system." "That is insane." "That is the way. They believe that individual combat is the expression of a species' worth. The Consortium Council has debated for 3 weeks about who to send. Every species has their champions, their warriors, but they have studied us all. They know our fighting styles, our limitations, our psychology." Leaned in again, and this time found he could not retreat. "But they do not know humans. You are too new. You are an unknown variable." So you want to throw a human at them and hope for the best. I want to give humanity a chance to prove itself on the galactic stage, said. Win this challenge, and Earth will gain mining rights to one of the richest systems in the sector. Your planet will leap forward economically by decades. Lose, and the consortium will negotiate a settlement with the... Either way, humanity will have made an impression. Tried to think clearly. This was too big. He was just a trader, someone who had scored high enough on the consortium integration tests to get shipped off to a distant station to sell Earth's goods and try to learn the basics of galactic commerce. He was not a warrior. He had never even been in a real fight beyond some drunken shoving at a university party. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Why not go through official channels?" Smiled, and for a moment her human mask slipped. He saw something ancient and calculating beneath. "Because official channels are too slow and the will not wait. Because I have spent 3 months watching you and I believe you are the right choice. Because I am willing to bet my own resources on you succeeding." "I am not a fighter." The champion is not just a fighter. He is a strategist, a commander. The combat is not purely physical. It is a test of will, of intelligence, of adaptability. These are things humans excel at, whether you realize it or not. Sat down on his bunk, his mind racing. And if I say no? Then I will find another human, but it will take time, and time is something we do not have. They have demanded an answer within 10 standard days. A ship leaves for the neutral meeting ground in 40 hours. Moved to the door, then paused. I should tell you one more thing. The champion's name is Or. He has fought in 63 challenges over his lifetime. He has never lost. After she left, sat in silence for a long time. His hands were shaking. This was crazy. This was suicide. This was everything he had never wanted. But it was also an opportunity. He thought about Earth, about how humanity was still seen as junior partners in the consortium, barely tolerated and constantly underestimated. He thought about the mining rights, the wealth that could transform his home planet. He thought about making a difference instead of just sitting in a metal box selling chocolate to curious aliens. He pulled up his personal terminal and began researching What he found was not encouraging. They were large, heavily muscled, with thick armored skin that could withstand most energy weapons. They had 4 arms, each ending in clawed hands. Their culture revolved entirely around martial prowess and conquest. They viewed mercy as weakness and surrender as the ultimate shame. The more read, the more hopeless it seemed. How could a human possibly stand against such a creature? Then he found something interesting. A historical record from 200 years ago when they had first encountered the consortium. In that first meeting, a war party had attacked a trading vessel. The species defending the vessel had fought bravely but conventionally, using shields and energy weapons and formal combat tactics. They had been slaughtered. But there was a footnote. A small mention of a minor species called the who had survived an encounter with the by using what the report called unorthodox and dishonorable tactics. The had used the environment, had set traps, had attacked from ambush. The had been furious, had declared the beneath their notice, but the had survived. Felt a smile tugging at his lips. Unorthodox and dishonorable, that sounded very human. He spent the rest of the night reading everything he could find about psychology, about their combat traditions, about their blind spots. When the morning cycle began, he had made his decision. He found in one of the stations many trading halls, negotiating for a shipment of quantum processors with a being that looked like a floating brain in a jar. She excused herself when she saw him approach. "I will do it," said, "but I have conditions." Sighs gleamed. "Name them." "I need access to all available information on physiology and psychology. I need to know the exact rules of the challenge, and I need equipment." "What sort of equipment?" "The kind that will make the very, very angry." Studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You are already thinking like a predator. Good. Come, we have much to prepare and little time." The next 40 hours were a blur. Proved to be an efficient ally pulling strings had not known existed. Information flowed to his terminal in streams. Detailed anatomical scans of warriors, historical records of their challenges, cultural analyses that broke down their code of honor into digestible pieces. Absorbed it all, his mind working overtime to find an angle, an edge, anything that would give him a chance. They were stronger, tougher, and more experienced. Fighting them on their terms would be suicide, so he would not fight on their terms. He requisitioned items from the station's inventory, some legal, some operating in a gray area. raised an eyebrow at some of his requests but approved them all. She seemed amused by his approach, though she offered no advice. This was his plan, for better or worse. The ship that came to collect them was a sleek vessel that seemed to bend light around itself, boarded with a duffel bag full of equipment and a head full of half-formed strategies. Joined him, along with 3 others who she introduced as her associates. They regarded with the same calculating interest that had shown. The journey to the neutral meeting ground took 30 hours. Spent most of it in his assigned quarters, going over his plan again and again, looking for holes. There were many. This might not work. This would probably not work, but it was a chance. Visited him as they approached their destination. The vessel has already arrived, or is waiting. Are you prepared? No, said honestly, but I am as ready as I am going to be. The rules of the challenge are simple. Single combat in a neutral arena. The arena will be a section of the disputed mining asteroid itself, a space approximately 1 square kilometer. You may bring whatever equipment you can carry. The fight continues until one combatant surrenders or dies. There are no other rules. No other rules, repeated. That gives me some room to work with. They will expect honor. They will expect a warrior's challenge. Then they are going to be disappointed. Smiled that unsettling smile. I am beginning to think I chose well. One more thing, there will be observers from 12 different species watching this challenge. What you do here will be remembered. Make sure it is a memory worth creating. The asteroid was a barren chunk of rock and metal, its surface pockmarked with craters and the scars of ancient impacts. The consortium had set up a viewing platform in orbit, a transparent dome where representatives from the various species could watch in safety. Could see them as his shuttle descended toward the surface, hundreds of beings representing the vast diversity of galactic civilization. The arena itself was a natural canyon, walls rising high on either side, the floor littered with boulders and debris. Harsh lights had been set up to illuminate the space, casting sharp shadows. At one end of the canyon stood Or. The champion was even larger than had anticipated. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his body covered in thick plates of natural armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. His forearms were thick with muscle, each hand flexing with barely contained power. His face was brutal and alien, with multiple eyes that tracked his approach with cold intelligence. Stepped out of the shuttle, feeling the reduced gravity of the asteroid beneath his feet. He had his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and he could feel the weight of every item inside. This was it. No turning back now. An arbiter drone floated down between them, its mechanical voice echoing in the thin atmosphere. This challenge is recognized by the Galactic Trade Consortium. The participants are or of the Dominion and of Earth. The terms are single combat for claim to mining system Epsilon 7. Do both parties acknowledge? I acknowledge, or rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. I will enjoy crushing this soft thing. I acknowledge, said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. Then let the challenge begin. The drone shot upward and suddenly was alone in the canyon with a creature that wanted to kill him, or began to advance, not rushing but moving with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. His eyes never left. Dropped his duffel bag and began pulling out equipment. He heard a confused murmur from the viewing platform above. This was not how challenges usually began. Warriors typically started with displays of strength, with ritual challenges and formal combat stances. Was ignoring all of that. He pulled out the first item, a collapsible shovel. He began digging into the loose regolith at his feet, working quickly, or paused, clearly confused. Then he laughed, a terrible booming sound. Are you digging your own grave, human? That is surprisingly practical. Did not answer. He moved to another spot, dug again, then another. He was creating holes, shallow pits covered with a thin cloth and loose rocks. Pitfall traps, crude but effective in the low gravity. Or's laughter died. This is your strategy, to hide and cower. This is my strategy to win, called back. Unless you would rather wait while I finish preparing. The taunt worked. Or's pride would not allow him to stand idle while his opponent prepared defenses. The charged forward with terrifying speed, his forearms spread wide to grab and crush. He sprinted toward the canyon wall, his human endurance already kicking in. He could not match the strength, but he could keep moving. He leapt over his own traps, hearing or behind him. Hit the first trap and stumbled, surprised by the deception. From his belt, pulled a canister and threw it. It exploded on impact, releasing a thick cloud of metallic chaff that disrupted sensors. Not that they relied much on sensors, but it provided cover. Used those precious seconds to reach the canyon wall and begin climbing. His hands found purchase on the rough rock, and he hauled himself upward. Below, or burst through the chaff cloud, his eyes tracking with fury. "Come down and fight," the bellowed. "Come up and get me," shouted back. He climbed higher, his muscles burning. This was the gamble. They were powerful but heavy. In the reduced gravity of the asteroid's slighter frame gave him an advantage in mobility. He reached a ledge and pulled himself up, then immediately began moving along it. Or followed, but his massive bulk made climbing difficult. His 4 arms gave him more grip points, but his weight worked against him. Used the time to get into position. When he finally hauled himself onto the ledge, he found waiting with another surprise. A series of thin wires stretched across the ledge at ankle height. In Earth's gravity, they might have been a minor nuisance. Here, they were enough to tangle Or's legs and send him stumbling forward. Was ready with a heavy rock. He brought it down on one of Or's upper hands with all his strength, aiming for the joint. The roared in pain and surprise. It was not a serious injury, but it was the first time in the challenge that had drawn blood. The watching aliens erupted in noise. This was not how challenges were supposed to go. This was not honorable combat. This was a human being clever and vicious and utterly shameless about it. Or backhanded with enough force to send him flying off the ledge. The human tumbled through the thin air and hit the canyon floor hard, the reduced gravity saving him from serious injury. He rolled to his feet, gasping, tasting blood in his mouth. He dropped from the ledge like a meteor, landing in a crouch. His eyes burned with anger now, all trace of amusement gone. "Enough tricks, human! Face me like a warrior!" Canyon had become a maze of traps and deception. Had spent the first 20 minutes of the challenge doing something no other challenger had likely done before. He had turned the battlefield itself into a weapon. While Or had expected a direct confrontation, had been studying the terrain, identifying every loose rock, every unstable surface, every shadow that could hide a surprise. Or charged again and led him on a chase through the canyon. That was faster in short bursts, but had the endurance. He could feel his human physiology doing what it was designed to do, burning through calories to keep his muscles oxygenated, sweating to regulate his temperature despite the thin atmosphere, his brain calculating trajectories and possibilities at speeds that surprised even himself. He led or toward a section of the canyon where the walls narrowed. Here had prepared another surprise. A series of small explosive charges, nothing powerful enough to seriously harm the heavily armored, but enough to bring down loose rock from above. He triggered them remotely as Or passed beneath. He looked up just in time to see tons of stone falling toward him. He raised his 4 arms and braced himself, his armor taking the impact. Rocks bounced off his plated hide, and he emerged from the dust cloud battered but far from defeated. But he was slower now, more cautious. The human had hurt his pride more than his body. "You fight like a coward," Or roared, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. Was already climbing again, this time moving laterally along the canyon wall where this bulk would make following difficult. "I fight to win," he called back. "There is a difference." Above, in the viewing platform, the assembled representatives of the Galactic Consortium watched in stunned silence. Stood among them, her form rippling with what might have been satisfaction. Next to her, a dignified being that resembled a crystalline spider turned several of its eyes toward her. "Your human fights dishonorably," the being said in a voice like chiming glass. "The will be insulted." "The should be impressed," replied. "He is still alive, is he not? Against or that alone is an achievement. He runs and hides, he uses tricks, this is not combat. This is survival. This is what makes humans dangerous. They do not fight by anyone's rules but their own." Back in the canyon, had reached a wider section where he had hidden his most ambitious trap. A section of the floor had been carefully undermined, supported by thin struts that would collapse under sufficient weight. He just needed to lure or onto it. He dropped down from the wall, making himself visible and vulnerable, or saw his chance and rushed forward with all 4 arms extended. Waited until the last possible moment, then dove to the side. The thundered past him, his momentum carrying him directly onto the weakened section of floor. The ground gave way beneath Or's weight. The plunged downward into a pit that had spent precious time enlarging, lined with sharp rocks and the jagged remains of ancient metal structures. It was not deep enough to be fatal, but it was deep enough to trap. Stood at the edge, breathing hard, and looked down at the furious warrior struggling among the debris. "Surrender," he called down. "You cannot win from there." Or's response was a roar of pure rage. His forearms began tearing at the walls of the pit, his natural strength ripping through stone and metal. He would not be trapped for long. Had expected this. He pulled out another item from his belt, a cylinder that he had specifically requested from the station's inventory. Industrial adhesive foam, the kind used to seal hull breaches in emergency situations. He activated it and tossed it into the pit. The canister exploded on impact, releasing a rapidly expanding foam that filled the pit and engulfed Or. The thrashed and roared, but the foam hardened in seconds, pinning his arms and legs. It would not hold him forever, his strength was too great, but it would slow him down. Sat down on the edge of the pit, his whole body shaking with exhaustion. He had been running and climbing and thinking at maximum capacity for nearly an hour. His human endurance was formidable, but it was not infinite. He needed a moment to catch his breath, to let his muscles recover. Below, Or had stopped struggling. When he spoke, his voice was different, colder. "You are clever, human, I will grant you that, but cleverness alone will not save you. I have fought opponents far more skilled than you. I have faced warriors who could split mountains with their strength, assassins who moved faster than thought. You are nothing but tricks and cowardice." Looked down at the trapped. "You are probably right. If this was a fair fight, I would be dead already. But here is the thing about humans, we do not do fair fights, we stack the deck. We change the rules, we use every advantage we can find or create. That is not honorable." "No," agreed. "But it is effective. Your people respect strength, right? Well, humans respect survival. We spent millions of years as prey animals who somehow became predators. We did not do that by being fair. We did it by being too stubborn to die and too clever to fight on anyone else's terms." Or was silent for a moment. Then he did something had not expected. He laughed. It was a different sound than before, less mocking, more genuine. "Perhaps I have underestimated your species. You fight like prey, but you think like a predator. That is interesting." The foam was beginning to crack. Could see Or's muscles bulging as he slowly forced his arms apart. Time for the next phase. Stood and moved away from the pit, heading toward another section of the canyon where he had prepared his final surprise. His legs felt like lead, and his hands were shaking from adrenaline crash, but he could not stop now. Behind him, he heard the sound of the foam giving way, followed by the thud of Or climbing out of the pit. "No more running, human," the bellowed. "We end this now." Turned to face him, or looked worse for wear. His armor was scratched and dented, one of his upper arms was moving stiffly from where it hit it with the rock, and there were patches of the adhesive foam still stuck to his hide. But his eyes burned with determination. He was done playing games. They stood facing each other across 50 meters of open ground. This was the moment had been both planning for and dreading. All his tricks, all his traps, had been about reaching this point while wearing down his opponent. Now came the real test. "You want to know why I agreed to this challenge?" said, his voice carrying across the canyon. "It was not for honor. It was not for glory. It was because my people need to prove something to the galaxy. We need to show that we belong here, that we can stand with species that have been traveling the stars for. And the only way to do that is to win." Or began walking forward, slow and deliberate. "Then let us see if your need is stronger than my skill." Reached into his belt and pulled out the last item he had prepared. It was small, innocent-looking. A grenade modified for use in low atmosphere. He had saved it for this moment. "I have studied your people," said. "I know your biology. I know that your eyes are adapted for the dim red light of your home world. I know that your multiple eyes give you excellent peripheral vision but make you sensitive to sudden bright light." He held up the grenade. "This is going to hurt. I am sorry." He threw the grenade and turned away, covering his own eyes. The explosion was not loud in the thin atmosphere, but the flash was intense, a burst of white light that seared across the canyon. Or roared in pain, his hands flying to his eyes. The light had not blinded him permanently, but it had stunned him, left him seeing spots and shadows. Charged forward. He had one chance, one moment while he was disoriented. He was not trying to kill, or that would be nearly impossible. But he had studied physiology extensively over the past 2 days, and he had identified a weakness. This armor was heaviest on their chest, back, and upper arms. But their lower joints, the places where their legs bent, were less protected to allow for mobility. And in the reduced gravity of the asteroid, joints were more vulnerable than they would be on a high-gravity world. Dove low, sliding across the regolith on his side. His hand found the knife he had strapped to his leg, a simple blade but sharp and strong. He slashed across the back of Or's lower left knee as he slid past, cutting through the softer tissue there. Or's leg buckled. The crash down to one knee, still half blind, his hands still covering his damaged eyes. Rolled to his feet and moved behind the fallen warrior, his knife now pressed against the back of Or's neck, where a gap in the armor plates offered access to vulnerable flesh. "Yield," gasped, his chest heaving. "Please, yield." The canyon fell silent. The entire consortium held its breath, or was still for a long moment, his massive body tense. Then slowly, he raised his upper right hand in the gesture of submission. "I yield," he said quietly. "The human has won." The viewing platform erupted in chaos. Some species were shouting in outrage, claiming the victory was invalid, that had fought dishonorably. Others were cheering or making whatever sounds their physiology allowed to express amazement. The Arbiter drone descended rapidly, its sensors confirming the submission. "The challenge is complete," the drone announced. "Of Earth is victorious. Mining System Epsilon 7 is awarded to the Galactic Trade Consortium, with mining rights granted to the human of Earth." Stepped back from Or, his knife falling from numb fingers. The slowly got to his feet, his eyes still watering but his vision returning. The two stood facing each other, one battered and exhausted, the other humiliated but thoughtful. "You fought well, human," Or said finally. "Not with honor but with intelligence and determination. Those are also forms of strength." "You could have killed me a dozen times if I had fought on your terms," replied. "I did what I had to do." Or nodded slowly. "I will remember this. My people will remember this. You have taught us something today, that there are more ways to win a fight than we had considered." He turned to leave, then paused. "What is your world like of Earth?" Thought about home, about blue skis and green fields, about cities full of chaos and dreams. "It is a world of persistence hunters," he said. "We do not give up, ever." "Then I hope we never have to fight your world in earnest," Or said, "because I think you would find ways to win that we could not imagine." The warrior limped away toward his waiting shuttle, stood alone in the canyon, barely able to believe what had just happened. He had won. Against all odds, using nothing but human stubbornness and creativity, he had defeated a champion who had never lost. A shuttle descended toward him, this one bearing markings. Herself emerged, her form shimmering with what now recognized as excitement. She approached him with that unsettling smile. "You have made quite an impression. The Consortium Council is in an uproar. Half of them are calling for your disqualification. The other half are calling you a genius." "Which half are you in?" asked tiredly. "I am in the half that is now very interested in forming a deeper alliance with humanity. Your people have something the galaxy has forgotten, the ability to think outside established patterns. We have become stagnant, bound by traditions and honor codes and ways of thinking that have not changed in. You humans are chaos in a universe of order." Laughed weakly. "I am not sure that is a compliment." "It is the highest compliment I can give. Come, we should return to the station. You need medical attention, and I suspect your people on Earth are going to want to hear about this." She helped him toward the shuttle and was too exhausted to protest. As they lifted off from the asteroid, he looked back at the canyon where he had fought for his life and for his species' future. He thought about what Or had said about humanity's persistence. The warrior had understood something fundamental. Humans did not win because they were the strongest or the fastest or the most advanced. They won because they refused to accept defeat, because they could look at any situation and find an angle, an edge, a way forward that no one else had considered. As the shuttle accelerated away from the asteroid, closed his eyes. He had come to space thinking he would be a minor player, a curiosity. Instead, he had become a symbol. Not because he was special, but because he had done what any human would do when faced with impossible odds. He had gotten creative, he had adapted, and he had survived. When he opened his eyes again, was watching him with those two knowing eyes. "There will be consequences from this, you know, good and bad. Humans will be taken more seriously now, but you will also be watched more carefully. Some species will want to ally with you. Others will want to test you to see if you were a fluke or if your entire species is this dangerous." "What do you think?" asked. Smile widened. I think the galaxy has no idea what it has let in. I think in 100 years, humanity will either be one of the dominant powers in the consortium, or you will have burned yourselves out trying. Either way, it is going to be very entertaining to watch. Looked out at the stars streaming past the viewport. Somewhere out there was Earth, his home, where billions of humans lived and worked and dreamed without knowing that one of their own had just changed everything. He had won mining rights that would enrich his planet for generations. But more than that, he had won respect. Fear, maybe, but respect too. And as any human knew, respect was something you could build on. It was a foundation for the future, for all the crazy, impossible things that humanity would try next. Because that was what his species did. They looked at the impossible and said, "Watch me." The shuttle docked with ship and was led to medical facilities far more advanced than anything Earth possessed. Alien doctors examined him with professional curiosity, treating his injuries while taking extensive scans. They murmured to each other in languages did not understand, but their tone suggested fascination. Later, after he had been patched up and given time to eat and rest, visited him in his quarters. She brought with her a data tablet displaying news feeds from across the consortium. Victory was the primary story on every network, analyzed from every angle. Some are calling it the upset of the century, said. Others are calling it a travesty. The Dominion has issued a formal statement acknowledging your victory, but noting that you fought without proper respect for combat traditions. Several species have requested documentation of your tactics for study. And Earth asked, "What is my planet saying?" His expression softened slightly. Earth is celebrating. Your government has already begun planning for the mining operations. But more importantly, recruitment for the Consortium Integration Program has increased by 300% in the past 6 hours. Everyone wants to be the next. Felt a weight settle on his shoulders. He had not thought about that, about becoming a symbol, about the pressure his success would place on other humans following in his footsteps. I just did what I had to do. That is exactly why you succeeded, said. You did not overthink it. You did not try to be something you are not. You fought like a human with all of humanity's practical ruthlessness and creative thinking. That authenticity is what made your victory meaningful. She moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars. I want to offer you something, a position as an official liaison between humanity and the collective. We are one of the oldest species in the consortium, and we have resources that could benefit Earth greatly. But more than that, I think humans and could learn from each other. You have what we have lost: spontaneity, passion, the ability to take risks. We have what you need: patience, long-term thinking, established connections throughout the galaxy. Considered this? Why are you so interested in humanity? Turned back to him, and for once her expression seemed genuinely honest. Because in my 3,000 years of existence, I have seen the same patterns repeat endlessly. Species rise, mature, stagnate, decline. The consortium itself is locked in stasis, unable to change because we are all too invested in the status. Then humanity arrives, barely more than children by galactic standards, and you immediately start breaking rules we did not even know we were following. You are disruptive. You are unpredictable. You might be exactly what this galaxy needs. Or we might be a disaster waiting to happen, said. That too, agreed with a smile. But I am willing to take that risk. What do you say? Do you want to help shape humanity's future among the stars? Thought about his life before this moment, about being a small trader on an isolated station, about feeling insignificant and overwhelmed. Then he thought about standing in that canyon, facing down an impossible opponent, and finding a way to win. He thought about what that meant for every human who would come after him. Yes, he said finally, yes, I do. Smile was brilliant and slightly terrifying. Excellent. Then we have much work to do. The Consortium Council has called for a full meeting to discuss the implications of your victory. They will want to meet you to question you to understand what you represent. Some will be hostile, many will be skeptical. You will need to be prepared. Over the following days, as they traveled toward the Consortium's central hub, underwent intensive briefings. He learned the political landscape of galactic civilization, the old alliances and ancient grudges that shaped policy. He learned which species were open to humanity and which viewed them as upstarts or threats. He learned how to navigate the complex web of consortium law and custom without accidentally causing an interstellar incident. It was overwhelming. Sometimes wondered if he had made a terrible mistake, if he should have just gone back to Earth and let someone more qualified handle the diplomatic work. But then he would remember Orr's words. Humans did not give up. They persisted. They adapted. And most importantly, they did things their own way. When they finally reached the Consortium hub, a massive station, the Consortium Central Hub, was a marvel of engineering that made feel very small and very far from home. The station hung in space like a mechanical planet, its surface covered with docking bays, observation decks, and structures whose purposes could only guess at. Ships from hundreds of species came and went in a carefully choreographed dance, and somewhere deep inside this massive construct, the most powerful beings in the galaxy made decisions that affected trillions of lives. Stood in the docking bay of ship, wearing formal attire that Earth's diplomatic corps had rush-delivered via quantum courier. The suit was uncomfortable and felt absurdly inadequate for the task ahead, but it was the best they could do on short notice. Floated beside him, her form today more solid than usual, taking on the appearance of dignified robes that seemed to flow even in the absence of wind. "Remember," she said quietly, "the Council will try to intimidate you. They will question your victory, your methods, your species' worthiness. Do not lose your temper. Do not apologize for winning. Stand firm." "Any other encouraging advice?" asked, trying to keep his voice light despite the knot in his stomach. "Yes, be yourself. That seems to work well for you." They disembarked and were immediately met by a security detail unlike anything had seen. The guards were a species that resembled 8-foot-tall mantises made of living metal. They moved with perfect synchronization, surrounding and in a formation that was somehow both protective and threatening. The journey through the station was surreal. Corridors wide enough to accommodate beings 3 times size. Gravity that shifted subtly as they moved between sections designed for different species. Beings of every imaginable shape and size going about their business, most ignoring the human in their midst, though some stopped to stare. They passed through security checkpoints where was scanned by technologies he could not begin to understand. At one point, a floating orb of light questioned him in a language that bypassed his ears entirely and spoke directly into his mind. It was an unsettling experience, but answered truthfully, and the orb allowed him to pass. Finally, they reached the council chamber. The doors were massive, carved from a single piece of crystallized spacetime that showed reflections of places that did not exist. They opened silently and stepped through into a space that easy description. The chamber was circular and enormous, with a domed ceiling that displayed a real-time view of the galaxy itself. Thousands of stars wheeled overhead and could pick out the tiny yellow dot that was Sol, humanity's sun, lost in the vastness. Around the perimeter of the chamber sat the representatives of the consortium's major powers, each on a platform adapted to their species' needs. There was the Crystalline Confederacy, beings of living glass who communicated through light and resonance. The Hive Collective, a mass consciousness spread across billions of bodies. The Void Walkers, creatures that existed partially in another dimension and appeared as shadows with too many edges. And dozens more, each ancient beyond human comprehension, each representing civilizations that had been traveling the stars when humanity's ancestors were still learning to make fire. At the center of the chamber was a small platform, clearly meant for the person being addressed by the council. Walked to it with beside him, trying not to show how overwhelmed he felt. When he reached the platform, it rose smoothly, lifting him until he was level with the council members, floating in the middle of the chamber like a specimen under examination. "Of Earth," a voice spoke, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. It took a moment to identify the speaker, one of the crystalline beings, its body refracting light into a rainbow of colors. "You stand before the Consortium Council to answer for your actions on mining asteroid Epsilon 7. You have claimed victory in a formal challenge against or of the Dominion. However, your methods have been called into question. Explain yourself." Took a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would define not just his future, but potentially humanity's place in the galaxy. He thought about all the briefings, all the advice had given him. Then he decided to ignore most of it and speak from the heart. "Honored Council," he began, his voice echoing in the vast chamber, "I am just a human. My species has been part of the consortium for only 5 years. We are young, inexperienced, and compared to most of you, barely more than children playing at civilization. When I was asked to face, or I knew I could not beat him in a fair fight, he is stronger, tougher, more experienced. So I did not fight fair. I used every advantage I could find or create. I used the terrain, I used surprise, I used my knowledge of his weaknesses, and I won." There was a murmur among the council, impossible to interpret, pressed on. I understand that some of you believe I fought dishonorably. In many of your cultures, there are rules about combat, about how warriors should behave. But I am not a warrior. I am a traitor who got thrown into a situation way over his head. So I did what humans do. I adapted. I survived. And yes, I won. You mock the traditions that have governed civilized warfare for? Another voice spoke, this one belonging to a being that looked like a column of swirling gases contained in a force field. You turned a test of strength into a series of cheap tricks. With respect, counselor, replied, those cheap tricks kept me alive against an opponent who has never lost a challenge, or acknowledged my victory. He could have refused, could have demanded a rematch under different conditions. But he did not because I think he understood something that maybe the council does not. There is more than one kind of strength. Explain, the crystalline being commanded. Gathered his thoughts. Every species here represents a different approach to existence. The crystalline confederacy values order and precision. The hive collective values unity and coordination. The value martial prowess. Each of you has survived and thrived by playing to your strengths. Humans are new to the galactic stage, and we are still figuring out what our strengths are. But I think I discovered at least one of them in that canyon. We are really, really good at finding solutions that nobody else would think of. Because you lack respect for established norms, the gas being said coldly. Because we have not been around long enough to be bound by them, countered. Look, I am not trying to be disrespectful. I understand that many of your species have traditions and codes of conduct that go back thousands or millions of years. That is impressive and worthy of respect. But humanity's strength is not tradition. Our strength is adaptability. We are the species that went from horse-drawn carts to interstellar travel in 200 years. We did not do that by following the established rules. A new voice spoke, deeper and more resonant than the others. Turned to see one of the void walkers leaning forward, its impossible geometry hurting to look at directly. The human makes an interesting point. The consortium has been operating under the same basic framework for 300,000 years. We have become comfortable, set in our ways, perhaps too set. You cannot seriously be suggesting we should embrace chaos, the crystalline being said, its colors shifting to something darker. I am suggesting, the void walker replied, that this human defeated a champion using creativity and unconventional thinking. Those are traits we have not seen much of lately. Perhaps they have value. The debate among the council members intensified. Stood on his platform, listening to beings argue about humanity's place in the galaxy in languages his translator could barely keep up with. Some were clearly hostile, viewing humans as dangerous variables that threatened the cosmic order. Others seemed intrigued, even excited by the possibilities humanity represented. Finally, the crystalline being raised one faceted appendage, and silence fell. Of Earth, the Council has deliberated. Your victory over or is acknowledged as legitimate. The mining rights to System Epsilon 7 will be granted to you as agreed. However, there is more to discuss. Felt his tension ease slightly. They were not going to overturn his victory, that was something. The Consortium Council recognizes that humanity represents a new and potentially valuable addition to our civilization, the crystalline being continued. However, your species' youth and inexperience pose certain risks. Therefore, we propose the following. Earth will be granted provisional full membership status in the consortium, with all associated rights and responsibilities. However, humanity will be required to establish a formal diplomatic corps and participate in the consortium's governance structure. You are hereby appointed as Earth's first ambassador at large to the Consortium Council. Stared at the council in shock. I am not a diplomat, I am a traitor. I am not qualified to represent Earth at this level. You defeated a champion using your wits and determination, the Void Walker said, something that might have been amusement in its voice. I would say you are exactly the kind of representative humanity needs. You demonstrate the traits that make your species interesting, resourcefulness, adaptability, and a complete disregard for doing things the conventional way. But there must be people on Earth who are better suited. There are many humans more experienced in formal diplomacy, the crystalline being interrupted. But they have not done what you have done. You have captured the galaxy's attention. You have made humanity impossible to ignore. That gives you credibility that no amount of training could provide. The Council has decided. Do you accept this appointment? His mind was racing. This was insane. He had no training, no experience in high-level diplomacy. He was going to fail spectacularly and embarrass his entire species. But then he thought about what he had told the Council about humanity's strength being adaptability, about finding solutions that nobody else would think of. If he refused now, it would undermine everything he had said. "I accept," he heard himself say, "but I am going to need help, a lot of help." "You will have it," spoke up from below. "The collective formally offers to serve as mentors and advisors to the human diplomatic effort. We believe our species can learn from each other." Other council members voiced their support or objections, and listened as his future was debated and shaped by beings who saw him as everything from a promising investment to a dangerous liability. Eventually, the crystalline being called for order once again. "It is settled. Will serve as Earth's ambassador at large with a probationary period of 1 standard year. During this time, he will establish formal diplomatic relationships, participate in council proceedings, and prove that humanity can contribute meaningfully to the consortium. Fail, and Earth's full membership will be revoked. Succeed, and humanity will earn its place among the stars." The platform began to descend and realized the session was over. He had come here expecting to defend his victory in the challenge. Instead, he was leaving as the official representative of his entire species. The weight of it was almost crushing. As he exited the council chamber, she placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch cool and strange. "Congratulations, Ambassador. You are now one of the most important humans in the galaxy." "I feel like I am going to throw up," admitted. "That is a reasonable response. Come, we should get you settled in your new quarters. Earth is sending a support staff to assist you, but they will not arrive for several days. Until then, you will need to begin learning the basics of consortium politics." The quarters assigned to Earth's new ambassador were located in the diplomatic sector of the hub, a massive ring that housed representatives from dozens of species. Accommodations were generous by human standards: multiple rooms, adjustable gravity and atmosphere, and a viewport that offered a stunning view of the galaxy wheeling by below. Helped him get oriented, showing him how to use the various alien technologies that filled the space. Everything from the food synthesizer to the communications array required careful attention, as they were designed to accommodate multiple species and had to configure them for human use. "There will be a reception tomorrow," informed him. "An informal gathering where you can meet other ambassadors and begin building relationships. I would advise attending, though it will be exhausting." "What should I expect?" "Curiosity, mostly. You are a novelty, the human who defeated a champion, who became an ambassador overnight. Everyone will want to meet you, to assess you, to figure out if you represent an opportunity or a threat." "And which am I?" Smiled that unsettling smile. "Both, of course. The most interesting people always are." She left him alone then, and spent the next hour just sitting by the viewport, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, millions of light years away, was Earth, his home. The planet full of humans who had no idea that one of their own had just committed them to a path that could lead to greatness or disaster. His communication terminal chimed. Activated it and found himself looking at a holographic representation of Earth's Secretary of Extraterrestrial Affairs, a stern woman named Doctor who had met briefly during his initial training. "Mister," she said without preamble, "I have just received word of your appointment. Congratulations are in order, though I will admit this has caught Earth's government somewhat off guard." "Join the club," muttered. "Indeed, well, we are scrambling to provide you with support. A diplomatic team is being assembled as we speak. In the meantime, I need you to understand something. You are not just representing yourself anymore. Every action you take, every word you speak will reflect on all of humanity. The pressure is immense, and I will not sugarcoat it. Many people believe you are not qualified for this position." "They are right," said. "I am not qualified, but I am what you have got." Doctor studied him for a long moment. "The council chose you for a reason. You did something no one expected, and you did it by being authentically human. Do not lose that. Do not try to become something you are not. We need you to be exactly the kind of unpredictable, creative problem solver you have already proven yourself to be." "No pressure," said with a weak smile. "All the pressure," Doctor corrected. "But I believe you can handle it. Humanity did not become a spacefaring species by playing it safe. We took risks. We pushed boundaries. You are continuing that tradition. Make us proud, Ambassador." The hologram faded and was alone again. He thought about what Doctor had said about being authentically human. That seemed to be the recurring theme. Everyone expected him to be different, to be unconventional, to approach problems in ways that nobody else would consider. The question was, could he live up to those expectations? Or would he eventually run out of clever tricks and find himself facing a problem that could not be solved with creativity and stubbornness alone? He did not have an answer. All he knew was that he had to try. For Earth, for humanity, for all the people who would follow in his footsteps, looking to him as an example of what a human could achieve among the stars. Spent the rest of the day familiarizing himself with his new role. He reviewed files on the major consortium powers, learning their histories, their cultures, their political positions. The sheer amount of information was overwhelming, but he forced himself to absorb as much as possible. Some species were easier to understand than others. The Mercantile Guild, for example, was straightforward. They cared about profit and stability, and they would support any policy that promoted trade. The Exploration Conclave valued discovery and knowledge, and they were generally friendly to newer species who brought fresh perspectives. Others were more complicated. The Preservation Front wanted to limit the spread of ion to protect primitive worlds from outside influence. The Harmony Collective believed in enforced peace and had been known to take aggressive action against species they deemed too warlike. The Dominion of Ascended Minds looked down on species that relied on physical forms rather than pure consciousness. And then there was the Dominion, paid special attention to them. His victory over or had been acknowledged, but that did not mean they were happy about it. He needed to understand how they would react, what this meant for Earth's relationship with one of the galaxy's major military powers. The files painted a complex picture. They were not simple warmongers. They valued martial prowess, yes, but they also had a sophisticated culture built around concepts of honor, duty, and personal excellence. They had been contained by the consortium for 3 centuries. Their aggressive expansion halted, but they remained a significant power with vast military resources and a population that numbered in the trillions. Found a note in the file marked with high priority. It was a communication from the Dominion addressed to Earth's new ambassador. His hands were shaking slightly as he opened it. The message was from or himself. "Of Earth," this recorded voice rumbled, "I have been giving much thought to our encounter. You defeated me using methods I had never encountered, tactics I had not prepared for. This should shame me, and indeed many of my people believe it does. But I find myself impressed rather than humiliated. You fought with intelligence and creativity, qualities my people have perhaps undervalued in our focus on martial strength. I have spoken with the Dominion Council about you, about humanity. There is much debate. Some view your species as weak and dishonorable. Others, myself included, see potential allies. We will be watching your tenure as ambassador with great interest. Fight well in the political arena as you did in the physical one, and perhaps we can find common ground. But know this, my people respect strength above all else. Show weakness, and we will see you as prey. Show strength, and we may see you as equals." The message ended and sat back, processing what he had just heard. This was both encouraging and terrifying. They were not automatically hostile, but they were testing him, waiting to see if his victory had been a fluke or a genuine demonstration of human capability. He needed to prove it was the latter, not just for his sake, but for every human who would deal with thee in the future. A chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. Called for entry, expecting perhaps or one of the hub's service personnel. Instead, the door opened to reveal a being he had never seen before. It stood about 5 feet tall, covered in soft blue fur that seemed to glow faintly. It had 4 arms but these were slender and delicate, ending in hands with too many fingers. Its face was vaguely feline, with large eyes that held surprising intelligence and warmth. Stood quickly, uncertain of the proper protocol for receiving alien dignitaries in his quarters. "Please, come in. I apologize if I am breaking any customs. I am still learning." Whisper of Rain made a gesture that's translator identified as amusement. "You are refreshingly honest about your inexperience. Most new ambassadors pretend they know far more than they do. It is one of the more tedious aspects of diplomatic life." The being moved into the room with a fluid grace that reminded of flowing water. "May I sit? Your furniture is not designed for my physiology, but I can adapt." "Of course, please," gestured to one of the chairs, which Whisper of Rain settled into, arranging its 4 arms in a posture that somehow conveyed both relaxation and alertness. "I wanted to meet you before you are overwhelmed by the chaos of official events." Whisper of Rain said. The chorus has been observing humanity since you joined the consortium, and we find your species fascinating. We are what you might call pacifists, though that term does not fully capture our philosophy. We believe in connection, communication, and understanding rather than conflict. That sounds like a healthy approach, said cautiously, unsure where this was leading. It has served us well for many, but it also means we lack certain qualities that you humans possess in abundance. Aggression, competitiveness, the willingness to take risks. These are not negative traits, despite how they are often portrayed. They are simply different approaches to existence. Whisper of Rain leaned forward slightly, its many fingers interlacing in a complex pattern. What you did on that asteroid was remarkable not because you won, but because you approached the challenge with a mindset that most consortium species have lost or never possessed. You saw the rules not as constraints, but as parameters to work within. You used every resource available to you, regardless of whether it was dignified or honorable. You prioritized victory over pride. Some would say I cheated, pointed out, and they would be applying their own cultural standards to a situation that did not require them. The challenge had one rule: win. You did. They understand this even if they do not like it. They respect results. Felt some of his tension ease. Whisper of Rain radiated a warmth and acceptance that was a stark contrast to the cold scrutiny of the council chamber. Thank you for saying that. I have been second-guessing myself constantly since the challenge ended. That is called wisdom, and it will serve you well. Confidence without self-reflection leads to arrogance. But do not let your doubts paralyze you. You have already proven you can think on your feet. Whisper of Rain stood, its fur rippling with colors had no name for. I should let you rest. Tomorrow will be exhausting, but I wanted you to know that not all consortium species view humanity with suspicion or fear. The chorus sees potential allies, beings who might help bridge the gap between the old ways and whatever comes next. I appreciate that more than you know, said sincerely. One more thing, Whisper of Rain paused at the door. At the reception tomorrow, you will meet an ambassador from the Preservation Front named Stonethought Eternal. They will likely challenge you, argue that humanity is too young and too reckless to be given significant authority. Do not let them provoke you into an emotional response. Stonethought Eternal is testing you, as they test all new species. Show them the same creativity you showed, but in conversation rather than combat. After Whisper of Rain left, felt simultaneously more confident and more anxious. He was beginning to understand that galactic politics was just as much a challenge as the physical combat had been. Every interaction was a test, every conversation a potential trap or opportunity. He forced himself to sleep, knowing he would need all his energy for the next day. His dreams were strange, filled with alien landscapes and conversations in languages he could not understand. When he woke, the hub's artificial day cycle was just beginning, and he had messages waiting from 3 different ambassadors requesting meetings. Took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away some of the stress. He dressed carefully in his formal attire, checked his appearance in the mirror, and tried not to think about all the ways this day could go wrong. The reception was held in one of the hub's grand halls, a space that adjusted its atmosphere and gravity into distinct zones, so that species with different environmental needs could all attend comfortably. Entered through the human-compatible zone, immediately overwhelmed by the sheer diversity of life surrounding him. There were beings made of crystalline structures that sang when they moved, creatures that floated like jellyfish in tanks of ammonia, living clouds of nanomachines that formed into vaguely humanoid shapes when communicating, beings so large they could only attend via holographic projection, and everywhere, the constant hum of translation devices converting thousands of languages into comprehensible information. Found him almost immediately. Ambassador, welcome. Are you ready to be scrutinized by everyone in the room? Not even remotely, admitted. Good, overconfidence would be concerning. Come, there are several people you should meet before the more hostile encounters begin. She guided him through the crowd, introducing him to ambassadors from species had only read about the previous night. Some were warm and welcoming, genuinely curious about humanity. Others were politely distant, clearly reserving judgment. A few were openly skeptical, looking at as if trying to figure out if he was a threat or just an amusing curiosity. One ambassador, a being that resembled a mobile plant covered in bioluminescent flowers, asked about Earth's environmental policies. Another, something like a 6-legged lizard with too many eyes, wanted to know about human military capabilities. A third, a crystalline entity that communicated entirely through mathematical concepts, tried to discuss trade agreements in terms barely understood. He did his best to answer honestly while not revealing more than he should. It was exhausting, trying to be diplomatic while also being authentically human, trying to represent his species well while not pretending to be something he was not. Then he met Stone Thought Eternal. The ambassador from the Preservation Front was unlike anything had encountered. It appeared to be a living geological formation, a being made of layered rock and crystal that somehow moved and thought and communicated. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding stone, deep and implacable. "So this is the human who defeated or through trickery and dishonor," Stone Thought Eternal said, making no attempt at diplomatic niceties. "I have reviewed the recordings of your challenge. You fought like a frightened animal, using deception and cowardice rather than strength." Felt anger flare but remembered Whisper of Rain's warning. This was a test. He needed to respond carefully. "I fought like a human. We are a species that survived by being clever, not by being the biggest or strongest. If that offends your sensibilities, I apologize, but I will not apologize for winning." "Your species is barely civilized," Stone Thought Eternal continued. "You still wage wars against your own kind. You destroy your environment. You are aggressive, short-sighted, and dangerous. The consortium made a mistake allowing you membership. And yet here I am, appointed as Earth's ambassador by the Council itself," replied, keeping his voice level. "Perhaps the Council sees something in humanity that you do not. I see a species that will spread chaos throughout the galaxy if given the chance. Your kind does not respect the established order. You do not understand the delicate balance that has kept the peace for. You are children playing with forces you cannot comprehend." Took a breath considering his response. He could get defensive, could argue point by point. But that was what Stone Thought Eternal wanted, to draw him into an emotional confrontation that would make him look unstable. So instead, he tried a different approach. "You are probably right," said, and he saw surprise ripple through the rocky ambassador's form. "Humans are young by galactic standards. We do not have of experience navigating interstellar politics. We make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones. We are learning as we go." "Then you admit you are not qualified to hold this position." "I admit that I am learning, but here is the thing about humans, we are really good at learning. Give us a problem and we will work at it until we find a solution. Give us a challenge and we will adapt until we overcome it. That is what we do. That is what I did on that asteroid, and that is what I will do here." Stone Thought Eternal was silent for a long moment. "You speak well for someone so inexperienced, but words are easy. I will be watching your actions, human. One mistake, one proof that your species is as dangerous as I believe, and I will push for Earth's expulsion from the consortium." "That is fair," said. "Hold us to high standards. We will do our best to meet them." The rocky ambassador moved away and felt his knees go weak with relief. Appeared at his side. "Well handled. Stone Thought Eternal expected you to become defensive or aggressive. Instead, you acknowledged their concerns while maintaining your position. That was surprisingly sophisticated." "I am basically making this up as I go," confessed. "Then you are a natural diplomat. Come, there are more people you should meet before this evening ends." The reception lasted for hours, and lost count of the number of beings he met, the conversations he navigated, the careful dance of saying enough without saying too much. By the time it finally ended, he was mentally and emotionally exhausted. Back in his quarters, he collapsed onto his bunk and stared at the ceiling. His communication terminal was blinking with more messages, more meeting requests, more demands on his time and attention. He ignored them for the moment, needing a few minutes to just exist without having to be ambassador. A priority message forced itself through his Do Not Disturb setting, groaned and activated it, expecting another diplomatic emergency. Instead, he found himself looking at a human face, someone he recognized from his training period. "It is Sarah from the integration program. I just heard you are the new ambassador. That is insane. Congratulations, I think." Sarah had been one of the other human traders in the program. Someone had shared late-night conversations with about how overwhelming it all was. Seeing a familiar, friendly face was like a lifeline. "Sarah, it is really good to see you. How are you? Where are you?" "I am on Station 9, actually. They transferred me there after you left. Listen, I have been hearing things, rumors about what you did on that asteroid. Everyone is talking about it. You are kind of a legend back on Earth now. People are calling you the giant killer. Laugh tiredly. I am just trying not to screw this up. It is overwhelming. I bet, but seriously, you are doing something amazing. You are showing the galaxy that humans belong out here. Every trader, every human working off-world, we are all proud of you. Do not let the pressure get to you. You have got this. They talked for a while longer, just normal conversation about life and work, and the strange experience of being human in a galaxy full of aliens. It grounded, reminded him that he was not alone, that there were other humans out there depending on him, but also supporting him. After Sarah signed off, felt renewed. He tackled the waiting messages with fresh energy, responding to meeting requests, reviewing briefing documents, preparing for the next day's challenges. This was his life now, and he needed to embrace it. The following weeks were a crash course in galactic politics. Attended council sessions where decisions were made that affected trillions of beings. He participated in subcommittee meetings on trade regulations, environmental protection, and conflict resolution. He negotiated with ambassadors who had centuries, or of experience, trying to hold his own against beings who had forgotten more about diplomacy than humanity had ever learned. It was brutal. He made mistakes, misread situations, occasionally said exactly the wrong thing. But he also had successes. He helped broker a small trade agreement between Earth and the Mercantile Guild that would bring valuable technologies to his. He made allies among the younger species, forming a loose coalition of newcomers who supported each other in council proceedings. And most importantly, he maintained his authenticity, never pretending to be something he was not. The situation remained a concern. True to Orr's word, they were watching him carefully. Several times, representatives attended sessions where was present, observing his performance with unreadable expressions. He had no idea if they were impressed or contemptuous, whether they saw him as a worthy opponent or a lucky amateur. Then came the crisis that would test everything had learned. It started with a distress signal from a small human colony on the frontier, a settlement called New Vancouver that had been established just 2 years earlier. The colony was reporting attacks by an unknown species, raiders who had appeared without warning and were targeting the settlement's infrastructure. Received the news during a routine council session, and he immediately requested an emergency hearing. The council granted it, and within hours he was standing before them again, this time not to defend himself but to plead for his people. The colony of New Vancouver is under attack, he told the assembled representatives. We do not know who is responsible. The raiders are using sophisticated technology and tactics. Our settlers are not equipped to defend against this level of threat. I am formally requesting consortium assistance to protect human civilians. There was a long silence. Then Stone Thought Eternal spoke. This is precisely why the Preservation Front opposed human expansion. Your species establishes colonies in disputed regions without proper preparation, then expects the consortium to protect you when conflicts arise. New Vancouver is not in a disputed region, countered, pulling up a star map. It is well within the boundaries approved by the Council for Human Settlement. These are unprovoked attacks on a peaceful colony. Peaceful? Stone Thought Eternal's voice dripped with skepticism. Or armed with weapons you have not disclosed. The consortium knows humanity has a violent history. Perhaps these raids are retaliation for human aggression. Felt his anger rising but forced it down. I have the colony's communications logs. They have not engaged in any hostile actions. They are farmers and engineers, not soldiers. They are dying because someone decided to attack them and they need help. The debate raged for hours. Some council members supported intervention, arguing that protecting member species was a fundamental consortium responsibility. Others argued for non-interference, claiming that humanity needed to learn to defend itself or that the situation was more complex than it appeared. Finally, the crystalline being called for order. The council will send an investigation team to assess the situation. However, military intervention will not be authorized until we have confirmed the nature of the threat and that human actions did not provoke these attacks. That could take weeks, protested. People are dying now. Then perhaps humanity should have been better prepared for the realities of frontier life, Stone Thought Eternal said coldly. Looked around the council chamber, seeing the same pattern he had seen in his challenge against Orr. A system designed around rules and procedures that did not account for the urgency of real situations. And suddenly, he knew what he had to do. "Then Earth will handle this ourselves," he declared. "If the consortium will not act, we will. I am authorizing the deployment of human defense forces to New Vancouver." The chamber erupted in chaos. Several ambassadors shouted objections, claiming was overstepping his authority, the crystalline being called for order repeatedly. "Ambassador," it finally said when quiet was restored, "you cannot unilaterally commit Earth to military action without council approval. That violates consortium law." "With respect, Counselor, I am not asking for permission. I am informing you of Earth's decision. My people are under attack, and I will not sit here debating procedure while they die. If that means Earth faces sanctions or even expulsion from the consortium, so be it. But I will not abandon them." Was suddenly beside him, her voice urgent and low. "What are you doing? You are throwing away everything you have built." "I am protecting my people," replied. "That is more important than politics." The crystalline being studied him for a long moment. "You understand that defying the council could have severe consequences." "I understand, but I am willing to face those consequences." Before anyone could respond, another voice spoke. It was Or, appearing via holographic projection from space. "The human shows strength. He places the welfare of his people above his own position. This is honorable. The Dominion will assist Earth in defending New Vancouver." The chamber fell silent in shock. An offer to help humanity was unprecedented. "The Dominion has ships near that sector," Or continued. "We can reach New Vancouver before any consortium investigation team, and we are curious to see if the humans fight as creatively in real combat as Ambassador did in our challenge. We will provide military support, asking nothing in return except the opportunity to observe human tactics." Stared at the warrior's projection, barely believing what he was hearing, or gave him a slight nod that might have been respect. "This is highly irregular," the crystalline being said, but there was something different in its tone now. Perhaps approval, perhaps just resignation. "Very well, the may assist under consortium observation, but Ambassador, this precedent concerns us. You cannot make a habit of defying council procedure." "Understood, Counselor. I hope I never have to do it again." The session was adjourned, and found himself surrounded by ambassadors, some congratulating him on his bold move, others warning him about the danger of setting such precedents. Pulled him aside. "That was either brilliant or suicidal, and I genuinely cannot tell which. You gambled your entire position on forcing the council's hand." "I did what any human would do," replied. "I protected my own." "And the noticed? You may have just changed the entire dynamic between humanity and the Dominion." Over the next few days, coordinated with military command, a surreal experience that involved working with beings he had been trained to view as the galaxy's great threat. But Or had been true to his word. Warships reached New Vancouver and drove off the raiders, who turned out to be a rogue faction operating illegally in consortium space. The investigation revealed that the attacks had nothing to do with human actions and everything to do with the raiders wanting to seize New Vancouver's strategic position. Had been right to act, and the Council's caution had nearly cost human lives. But more importantly, the incident had shown the galaxy something unexpected, that humans and could work together. Two species that should have been natural enemies had found common ground in protecting the innocent and respecting each other's strengths. Received a private communication from Or after the crisis ended. "You have impressed me twice now, first with your cunning in combat, now with your courage in defiance of authority. Perhaps my people and yours have more in common than anyone realized. We both value strength, whether it comes from muscle or from will. The Dominion proposes a formal alliance with Earth. Not membership in the Dominion, but a partnership between equals. What do you say?" Felt the weight of the moment. An alliance with the would transform Earth's position in the galaxy, but it would also tie humanity's fate to one of the most militaristic species in the consortium. It was a risk, but then again, what had humanity's journey to the stars been if not a series of calculated risks? "I would need to consult with my government," replied carefully. "But personally, I believe we have much to gain from understanding each other better. Let's start with smaller cooperations and see where it leads." Wisely said, "You think like a strategist, not just a warrior. That is good. The galaxy needs more of that, until we speak again of Earth." 6 months had passed since became Earth's ambassador, and the consortium's central hub had become something close to home, as much as any place millions of miles from Earth could be. His quarters were now personalized with items from home, photographs of family, a small terrarium with Earth plants, even a guitar that he played badly when the stress became too much. The support staff that Earth had promised finally arrived, a team of experienced diplomats, translators, and advisors who helped shoulder the impossible burden had been carrying alone. Doctor had come personally to oversee the establishment of Earth's full embassy, and her presence was a tremendous relief. But even with help, remained the face of humanity to the galaxy. His victory over or had become legendary, told and retold across 1,000 worlds, often with embellishments that made barely recognize the story. He was the human who had outsmarted the unbeatable, the ambassador who had the counsel to protect his people, the representative of a species that refused to play by anyone's rules but their own. It was exhausting being a symbol, longed for the simple days when he was just a trader worried about chocolate allocations and quarterly reports. But he had accepted this responsibility, and he would see it through. The nascent alliance with Tho was progressing cautiously, or had become an unexpected friend, or at least a respectful colleague. They communicated regularly, discussing everything from military tactics to cultural differences to their shared experiences as representatives of their respective peoples. The warrior had a dry sense of humor that translated surprisingly well, and found himself genuinely enjoying their conversations. But not everyone was happy with the human cooperation. The Preservation Front, led by Stonethought Eternal, viewed it as proof of humanity's dangerous nature. Other species worried about what it might mean for the balance of power in the consortium. There were whispers of concern that two relatively aggressive species might form a military bloc that could destabilize the carefully maintained peace. Was in the middle of a meeting with the Mercantile Guild, discussing expanded trade routes, when his emergency comm activated. Doctor's face appeared on the holographic display, and her expression told everything he needed to know. Something had gone very wrong. Ambassador, we have a situation. I am sending you the details now, but the short version is this. A consortium archaeological expedition has discovered something on a dead world in the frontier. Something that has the Council extremely worried. You are being summoned for an emergency session in 1 hour. Quickly wrapped up his meeting and raced back to his quarters to review the files. What he saw made his blood run cold. The archaeological expedition had been exploring a world that had once hosted an advanced civilization, long extinct. They had found ruins, which was expected, but they had also found something else, evidence of human presence. Not recent human presence, but ancient. Artifacts and genetic material that dated back hundreds of thousands of years, long before humanity had even developed writing, let alone. The implications were staggering. Either someone had taken prehistoric humans from Earth and brought them to this distant world, or humans had originated somewhere other than Earth and somehow ended up on both worlds. Either possibility suggested that humanity's history was far more complex than anyone had suspected. The council chamber was buzzing with activity when arrived. Every major ambassador was present, and the tension in the air was palpable. The crystalline being called the session to order with obvious difficulty. Ambassador, you have reviewed the expedition's findings. What is Earth's response to this discovery? Took a deep breath. Honestly, we are as shocked as everyone else. Earth's historical and genetic records show no evidence of extraterrestrial contact in our prehistoric past. If humans existed on this dead world, we have no knowledge of how or why. Convenient, Stonethought Eternal said coldly. Or perhaps humanity has been hiding its true origins, concealing the fact that you are not a native species but transplanted colonists. That is absurd, shot back. We have detailed fossil records going back millions of years on Earth. Our evolutionary history is well documented. If we originated elsewhere, there would be evidence. Unless that evidence was deliberately hidden, another ambassador suggested, a being made of swirling gases. This discovery raises serious questions about what humanity truly is and what your intentions might be. The debate quickly spiraled out of control. Accusations flew. Some species demanded that Earth's consortium membership be suspended pending a full investigation. Others called for humanity to be quarantined until the mystery could be solved. The fact that no one had answers only made the panic worse. Felt the situation slipping away from him. 6 months of careful diplomacy, of building trust and alliances, was crumbling because of something he had no control over and could not explain. He needed to regain control of the narrative, but how? Then spoke up, her voice cutting through the chaos. Perhaps we are approaching this from the wrong angle. Instead of assuming conspiracy or deception, consider another possibility, that humanity is as much a victim of this mystery as anyone else. Someone or something interfered with human development in the distant past. The question is not what humans are hiding, but what was done to them without their knowledge. The chamber quieted somewhat, continued. The collective has studied the expedition data in detail. The human artifacts found on that dead world are primitive, suggesting early tool use, possibly pre-agricultural society. But the world itself shows signs of environmental collapse, something that happened catastrophically and killed everything on the planet. If humans were present, they died along with whatever other species existed there. "What are you suggesting?" the crystalline being asked. "I am suggesting that we may be looking at evidence of an ancient crime. Someone took primitive humans from one world and brought them to another, perhaps as an experiment or for labor or for reasons we cannot fathom. When that world died, the humans there died with it. The humans on Earth survived because Earth was never touched by whatever catastrophe destroyed that other world." Felt a chill run down his spine. It made a horrible kind of sense, and it reframed the entire situation from what are humans hiding to what was done to humanity. "If this is true," said slowly, "then Earth deserves answers as much as the consortium does. My people have a right to know who interfered with our past and why. I propose a joint investigation with human participation to uncover the truth, not as suspects, but as fellow victims of whatever happened in our ancient past." The council debated for hours. Eventually, they agreed to his proposal, though with strict oversight and conditions. Earth would be allowed to participate in the investigation, but they would not control it. The consortium's best scientific minds would be brought in, along with historical experts and from a dozen species. The investigation took months and involved excavations on multiple worlds, analysis of genetic data, and examination of ancient records from species old enough to potentially have witnessed what happened. Slowly, a picture began to emerge, and it was disturbing. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, there had been a species the investigators began calling the progenitors. They were advanced beyond anything the current consortium had achieved, with technology that seemed almost magical. And they had engaged in large-scale genetic engineering and species manipulation across multiple worlds. Humans were not the only species they had interfered with. Evidence suggested that at least 6 current consortium species had been subject to progenitor manipulation in their distant pasts. The progenitors had taken primitive species, modified them, transplanted them, experimented with them. Their motivations remained unclear, lost to the vast expanse of time. The dead world where human artifacts had been found was one of the progenitors' experimental sites. Something had gone wrong, catastrophically wrong, and the entire world had been sterilized. The humans there, along with dozens of other transplanted species, had been wiped out. Only their genetic legacy remained, scattered across multiple worlds, a testament to the progenitors' ambition and the disaster that had ended their civilization. When the investigation's findings were presented to the council, the reaction was mixed. Some species were horrified to learn they had been manipulated in their past. Others were relieved that the mystery had been solved. A few, like Stone Thought Eternal, argued that this made humanity even more dangerous, as they were the product of ancient genetic tampering. But the majority of the council came to a different conclusion, that all species, human and alien alike, were victims of forces beyond their control. What mattered was not their origin, but what they chose to do with their existence. Stood before the council once again, but this time the atmosphere was different. There was sympathy, understanding, and a recognition that humanity's journey had been even more complicated than anyone had imagined. "Ambassador," the crystalline being said, "the council has reviewed all evidence regarding the progenitor interference with human development. While questions remain about the exact nature of that interference, it is clear that humanity as it exists today is a product of its own choices and development, regardless of ancient manipulation. Earth's consortium membership is reaffirmed without reservation. Moreover, the Council wishes to acknowledge that you have served with distinction during a difficult period. Your probationary status is hereby ended. You are now Earth's full ambassador, with all rights and responsibilities that entails." Relief flooded through. Not just for himself, but for Earth, for all the humans who had been wondering if they would be expelled from the galactic community because of mysteries they had no part in creating. "Thank you, counselors," said, his voice thick with emotion. "Humanity is honored to be part of the consortium, and we will continue working to prove ourselves worthy of that membership." Over the following weeks, the revelation about the progenitors had unexpected effects. Species that had viewed each other with suspicion or hostility began to find common ground in their shared victimization. Old grievances seemed less important in the face of the understanding that all of them had been shaped by forces beyond their control. The Human Alliance, or attended a formal ceremony on Earth, the first warrior to visit humanities. Images of the massive alien standing beside human leaders were broadcast across the consortium, a powerful symbol of how much had changed. Whisper of Rain's chorus of connected worlds proposed a new initiative, the Consortium Unity Project, designed to bring younger species together with older ones in cooperative ventures that would benefit all. Was appointed to lead the human participation in this project, working alongside ambassadors from dozens of other species. Even Stone Thought Eternal softened slightly. The rocky ambassador would never be friendly, but the hostility was replaced with something closer to grudging respect. Had proven that humanity could be responsible, could handle crises with wisdom rather than just aggression, could be trusted. But the most meaningful change came in a private conversation with, 6 months after the progenitor revelations. They were in one of the hub's observation decks, looking out at the galaxy and discussing nothing in particular. "When I first approached you on Station 9, said, I saw potential, a human who might be able to navigate the complexities of galactic politics. I gambled on you. I want you to know that I believe it was the best gamble I have ever made." "You whispered a question that day," said, remembering. "You asked if I wanted this now or later. I did not really understand what you were offering. I still do not think I fully understand." "I was offering you a chance to be more than you were," replied. "To step beyond the safe and comfortable and become something greater. You could have refused, could have stayed a simple trader. But you chose to take the risk, and look what you have become." Looked out at the stars, thinking about everything that had happened. The challenge, the victories, the crises, the discoveries. He had been thrown into situations he was not prepared for, had made mistakes and somehow survived them, had represented his species through circumstances that no training could have prepared him for. "I was terrified," he admitted. "I still am sometimes, the weight of it all, the responsibility. That is what makes you effective. You never forgot that you are just one human trying to do his best. That authenticity, that humanity is your greatest strength. You never tried to be a perfect ambassador. You were just, and somehow that was enough." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, then said, "There will be more challenges ahead. The galaxy is vast, and humanity is just beginning to explore its place in it. You will face situations that make Or's challenge look simple. But I believe you will handle them the same way you have handled everything else, with creativity, determination, and an absolute refusal to give up." "And if I fail," asked. "Then you fail as a human, making the attempt with everything you have. There is no shame in that. The only shame would be not trying at all." Returned to his quarters that evening and found a message waiting from Earth. It was from his family, his parents and siblings, all crowded around a camera to talk to him. They were proud, they said. They missed him, but they understood why he was out there. They told him about their lives, about the changes on Earth as the planet began to truly engage with the galactic community. And at the end, his youngest sister said something that stuck with him. "You showed everyone that humans belong out there. Now the rest of us have to live up to that. No pressure, right?" Laughed and sent a response. No pressure indeed. But he was not carrying that burden alone anymore. Earth was developing its own diplomatic corps, its own explorers, its own representatives. Had been the first, the one who proved it was possible. Now others would follow, each bringing their own talents and perspectives. He was no longer the sole human voice in the galaxy. He was just one of many, and somehow that made everything easier. A year after his appointment as ambassador, attended a gathering of junior species, those who had joined the consortium within the past century. They met informally, without the weight of council protocols, to discuss shared challenges and support each other. It was Whisper of Rain's idea, and it had become an important forum for species finding their way in galactic civilization. found himself telling the story of his challenge against, or a story many had heard but wanted to hear from the source. He described his fear, his improvised tactics, his absolute certainty that he was going to die. And he described the moment when he realized he might actually win if he just refused to give up. "That is very human," one ambassador said, a being that looked like a floating sphere of liquid metal. "This refusal to accept defeat, is it something all your species shares?" "Not all of us," said thoughtfully. "But it is a trait humanity values. We tell stories about underdogs, about people who faced impossible odds and found ways to overcome them. We celebrate persistence, creativity, the willingness to try something new. It is part of our cultural DNA, maybe even our literal DNA thanks to those progenitors. We are survivors." "It is a valuable trait," Whisper of Rain observed. "One that the consortium needs more of. We older species have become comfortable, perhaps too comfortable. We follow established patterns because they are safe, but safety can become stagnation." The conversation continued late into the hub's night cycle, with ambassadors from young species sharing their own stories of challenges overcome, of finding their place in a galaxy that often seemed designed for species that had been navigating it for. There was camaraderie here, a sense of shared struggle that transcended the vast differences between their species. As the gathering broke up, felt something he had not felt in a long time: contentment. He had found his place, not just as Earth's ambassador, but as part of a larger community of beings trying to make the galaxy a better, more inclusive place. He returned to his quarters and made his nightly log entry, a habit he had developed to document his experiences for future human diplomats. As he recorded his thoughts about the day, about the connections he had made and the progress humanity was making, he realized something important. He had been given a choice on Station 9 when had approached him with her proposal. He could have refused, could have stayed safe and comfortable and unremarkable. But he had chosen to step forward, to take the risk, to become something more than he had been. And in making that choice, he had not just changed his own life. He had helped change the trajectory of his entire species. Humans were now recognized as full members of the galactic community, not just because they had met some arbitrary standard, but because had shown that humanity had something valuable to offer: a fresh perspective, a willingness to try new approaches, and a stubborn refusal to accept that anything was impossible. The weight of that responsibility had felt crushing at first. Now it felt like a privilege. He was living at a pivotal moment in human history, helping to shape the relationship between Earth and the stars. Future generations would look back at this time, at the early days of humanity's expansion into the galaxy, and they would see the foundation that was being laid right now. Closed his log entry and prepared for sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new meetings, new opportunities to represent his species. But tonight, he allowed himself to simply be satisfied with how far he had come. As he drifted off to sleep, he thought about his question one more time. "Do you want me now or later?" She had been asking if he was ready to become something greater, if he wanted to step into a role that would define the rest of his life. He had said yes. And despite everything, despite the fear and the pressure and the constant feeling of being in over his head, he would make that choice again in a heartbeat. Because that was what humans did. They took chances. They adapted. They persisted. And when the galaxy asked if they belonged among the stars, they answered not with words but with actions that spoke louder than any declaration. Had been a small trader on an isolated station, nobody special, just another human trying to find his way in a vast and complicated galaxy. Now he was ambassador, the human who had defeated a champion, who had the counsel to protect his people, who had helped uncover ancient mysteries and forge new alliances. But at his core, he was still the same person who had stood in that canyon facing an impossible opponent and decided that impossible just meant he needed to be more creative. That fundamental human trait, the refusal to accept defeat, the determination to find a way forward no matter how difficult the path, that was what had brought him here. And that was what would carry humanity forward into whatever challenges the galaxy had waiting for them. Because if there was one thing had learned, one truth that had been proven again and again, it was this: humans might be young, might be inexperienced, might be reckless and emotional, and sometimes too stubborn for their own good. But they were also clever, adaptable, and absolutely unwilling to quit. And in a galaxy full of ancient civilizations set in their ways, that made humanity exactly the kind of chaos the cosmos needed. The future was uncertain. There would be more challenges, more crises, more moments when everything seemed to hang in the balance, but was ready for them. Not because he had all the answers, not because he was the perfect ambassador, but because he was willing to try, to adapt, to find solutions that nobody else would think of. He was human, and in this vast galaxy full of wonders and dangers, that was exactly what he needed to be. The stars wheeled overhead as the consortium hub continued its eternal orbit. Somewhere out there, Earth hung in the darkness, a small blue world that had sent one of its children to speak for them among the stars. And that child had proven that humanity belonged, not through might or ancient heritage or technological superiority, but through the simple act of refusing to give up. It was enough, it would always be enough, because in the end that was what being human meant, facing the impossible and saying, "Watch me." And the galaxy was watching. The galaxy was paying attention. And slowly, grudgingly, admiringly, the galaxy was learning that when humans set their minds to something, when they committed to a goal and refused to quit, they had a way of making the impossible become merely difficult, and the difficult become achievable. Slept and dreamed of stars and woke ready to face another day of representing his species among the cosmos. It was terrifying, it was exhilarating, it was exhausting, it was privilege. It was what he had chosen, that day when had whispered her question and his mind had gone blank with the enormity of the decision before him. He had chosen this path, and he would walk it to wherever it led, because that was what humans did. They persisted, they adapted, they survived, and sometimes when they got really lucky and worked really hard, they thrived. Earth's ambassador stood at the viewport of his quarters, looking out at a galaxy that had once seemed impossibly vast and terrifying. It still was. But it was also full of possibilities, of opportunities, of chances to prove what humanity could become, and intended to make sure his species made the most of every single one. The hologram faded and sat back, exhausted but satisfied. He had navigated another impossible situation and come out stronger for it, but he knew this was just the beginning. Each success raised expectations, each challenge overcome led to greater responsibilities. "Ambassador," the being said in perfect English, its voice musical and gentle. "I am Whisper of Rain, representative of the Chorus of Connected Worlds. I apologize for the unannounced visit, but I wanted to welcome you to the hub before the official reception tomorrow." At Dwarfed, anything humanity had built, felt his resolve strengthen. This was it. This was humanity's chance to prove they belonged among the stars, and he was going to make sure they did not waste it. Wiped blood from his lip and grinned. "I am not a warrior, I am a persistence hunter, and I am just getting started."